Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants adventure. It is so nice to meet so many of you for the first time today. If you are joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And if you're an old-timer who's been joining us for years, then you'll know that we really upped our intro game this year, so I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We are going to dive in with a really exciting series today that I will highlight in just 2 seconds. But first, I've got a note that we are going to have a Kahoot today. So if you're joining us live, if you're joining us on YouTube, if you're joining us in 3 weeks next Tuesday, you can tune in with this Kahoot on a separate tab in your computer, play along with a little 4-question quiz between our talk and Q&A, test your understanding, and have a little bit of fun. We'll be doing that in about 25 minutes, so stay tuned for that. Now, I'm so excited, not just because we are back underway with the adventure of a new school year, but because we are kicking off an epic 5-part series this week right now. We are joined live by Mala, and she is at OceanWise, which is like the leading organization in the world for teaching people about our oceans, their impact, how we can get involved, take action, help save them, and more. It's always such a thrill to have OceanWise on. You're in for such a treat every single day this week at 1 Eastern if you want to join us for that whole epic series. But today, we're starting off with over 700 kids on Arctic adventures, which is one of my favorite all-time topics. So I'm going to turn you over to her. She's going to blow your mind with a little bit of an Arctic adventure. We're going to put our coats on together in Chile as fall comes in. And so without further ado, I'll zip my lip now. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome back.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here. That intro was amazing. Thank you so much for gassing us up. Thank you all so much for joining. As Jesse mentioned, my name is Mala. I use she and her pronouns, and I am an educator and coordinator for the education team at OceanWise. Now, one of the coolest part about my job is that I get to connect with people all around the world and talk to them about our amazing ocean. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you're all just as excited as Jesse and I are to get this week started. We're starting off a little bit cold, but I hope you're all really excited to learn about something new and step into an environment and an ecosystem that many of us don't know much about. Maybe a lot of us won't have the opportunity to experience, but maybe we can still learn something new together today. My friends, I am located in Toronto, Ontario, and that is the traditional territory of many different nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat people. This land is Inuit and Métis people. And before getting the program started, I wanted to honor and extend my thanks to the communities who have been here since time immemorial, taking care of our amazing, incredible, wonderful land, sea, and sky. My friends, just to introduce myself a little bit more, 2 of my favorite ocean animals are whale sharks and nudibranchs, which now that I think about it, it's kind of ironic considering that that is both one of the largest and smallest animals in our ocean. And I would love to know a little bit more about you. Let me know, message me in the chat. Let me know what your favorite ocean animals are, or maybe on theme, we can talk a little bit about what Arctic animal you know, are familiar with, or, love the most. I see Jesse jumping in real quick in the comments saying a whale shark as well. We have Avoca West, grade 3s. I hope I'm pronouncing names, school names and people names correctly. Mentioning beluga whales. Oh, classic. We have lots of people coming in mentioning sharks, of course. And dolphins, very social, very playful. Oh my God, so many people love sharks. I don't blame you. They're absolutely incredible.
Rock.
We have some people mentioning. Sorry, what was that?
I just said so many great options. You guys are like the best chat crew of all time. I love it.
I'm loving the energy. I see so many answers coming in. Let's keep it going. We have so many questions for you all to participate in and answer as we go through the program today. I'm loving the energy. Thank you so much. I see one answer in specific mentioning Arctic foxes and polar bears, 2 very, very important animals that we will be talking a little bit more about in today's program. Before we dive in, I did want to introduce OceanWise to you all, which is the organization that I work for. We focus on educating and bringing awareness to climate change, overfishing, and ocean pollution. We have a bunch of different teams that are working together to collect data so that we can present it to you all and continuously learn about what our ocean is going through and what we can do to maybe help. I want everybody to, as we're going through today's program, take themselves out of your classroom. Think about this really cold environment and think about the impact that we might have on our ocean from where we are. As we're going through today's program, I want us all to think about that. And at the end, we will revisit that question. Alrighty, my friends. So I have a couple of different ecosystems here, and I want you all to message me which one would probably represent you or the area of the world that maybe you're from. Which ecosystem would represent you? I feel like I would be a beach. I just kind of want to relax, kind of hang out in the warm weather.
Again, you
Ooh,
guys are such a
freshwater
great
lake.
chat crew. We got more beaches in our Miami crew, freshwater lake in Illinois. YouTubers, feel free to chime in as well. We'll absolutely take all the things you share. But you guys are so on the ball for this. Lake Michigan, nice deep sea for our grade sixes. Awesome.
I love it. Thank you all so much again for the participation. I'm seeing a lot of deep sea. I'm seeing a lot of kelp forest, amazing ecosystems. My friends, today, to start off our week-long worth of sessions, we are starting off in the north. We are starting off in the Arctic. And in specific, we're going to be covering foxes, stories, and adventures in the Arctic. My friends, there are around 4 million people and over 21,000 known species of plants and animals that live inside of the Arctic. Living in this harsh and changing environment is not for the weak, okay? And I want to know there are a lot of challenges that might come up with trying to live in this type of environment. What do you folks think? What do you think would be some challenges or, some things that you might need to overcome in order to survive in the harsh conditions of the Arctic? What do we think?
Again, we're going to be taking all sorts of questions. So, YouTubers, if you guys want to chime in too, please do. What are some things that would help you survive in a really cold landscape? Interestingly enough, we just wrapped up with Port au Choix National Historic Site in Newfoundland. They talk about making sealskin stuff to survive the really cold weather here in Newfoundland. So, fur coat is our first answer coming in. That's awesome. Food and water, yes, a thing that's essential to survive a little bit everywhere. We've got cold weather gear coming in, needing really thick fur. So helping survive with cold, and it looks like it's all in the slide. That's awesome.
Amazing. You all got it. Some challenges might be the cold. Another challenge might be, food, maybe the darkness. It gets really, really dark in the Arctic. So some things that we might need to bring would include, a jacket, mittens, gloves, scarves, maybe some shelter, something to create fire, maybe a teddy bear, soccer ball, not so much. That was just to throw you folks off. But everybody in the chat, you're absolutely correct. You want to be ready for this warmth. But, people around the world have been visiting the Arctic. And as I mentioned, there are thousands of people, millions of people that live in the Arctic, and they have lived up there very successfully for hundreds of years. So there's definitely a way to adapt to that environment and survive. And today, we're going to talk a little bit more about them. So what are some challenges to living in the Arctic? Today, we are going to cover 3 of them. We are going to be doing, we have 3 different issues here. We have the cold, we have food scarcity, and then climate change. So let's get started off with the cold. How would you stay warm in the Arctic? Now, I know we kind of covered this already. Some of you mentioned jackets, hats, scarves, maybe some fire. That's how we would stay warm. But what about animals? How do you think animals are staying warm? Because they're not going to put on mittens and gloves and hats and jackets. So I turn it over to you folks. What do we think animals would do to stay warm?
Let's see. We'll get those answers in. Oh, we've got sort of build a shelter, hide in a shelter. We've got fur, so lots of things to sort of the natural code of creatures. Fur galore. Everyone's saying fur. Blubber, so fat under the skin. Nice cozy bed, lots of food, so eating things to help keep yourself warm. Thick skin, shelters, dens. These are some great kids, man. You guys are awesome.
You are all Arctic experts, and you're absolutely correct. We are going to be covering 2 different things that animals like to use a lot to stay warm. We have animals that go underwater a lot that love to use something called blubber, like a seal maybe. And then we have an animal on land that loves to use its very, very thick fur to stay warm, and that is the Arctic fox. My friends, let's get started off with blubber first. Many animals in the ocean rely on something called blubber to keep themselves warm. Minus their fins, blubber is a really, really important part of a marine mammal's anatomy. It essentially stores energy and traps the heat inside of its body. It's a very, very thick layer of fat on their body that will kind of trap in all of that heat. And blubber can be really, really thick depending on the animal that we're talking about. In fact, sometimes it can even be up to 50 centimeters thick on some marine animals. Now, I want to know which one of these animals probably doesn't have blubber to stay warm. We have 4 options here: fish, seals, whales, or walruses. What do we think?
Decisions. Some of these are very Arctic in where they might live. Some of you might know that already. Overwhelmingly, fish coming through on StreamYard and YouTube. Yes, I think that might be correct.
You would be absolutely correct. It is definitely fish. Fish are going to move a lot underwater to keep themselves warm, and they might have a very specific nervous system that'll keep them very warm. But animals like seals and walruses are all going to use something called blubber to keep themselves warm. At this time, I would like everybody to show me a thumbs up. Everybody put your thumb up wherever you are in your classroom. And then please stick it out of your chest or your belly, wherever you're most comfortable. You can then place your hand in front of your thumb and then drop your thumb, but keep your hand up. If you were a seal, this is approximately how much blubber you would have on your body to insulate you and keep you very, very warm. So you probably have a lot of blubber to keep yourself very, very warm and snug in the very, very cold Arctic. All right, my friends, moving on to our next friend here, we have the Arctic fox. These guys are extremely well adapted to the harsh, frigid temperatures of the Arctic. Their thick fur helps them maintain a very consistent body temperature, and it also traps in a lot of that heat. With their really, really short legs and their short nose and their rounded ears, it also reduces the amount of surface area that heat can kind of leave from. So even the way that their face and their paws are all shaped, it's all to make sure that these guys can trap in as much heat as possible. The Arctic fox actually has the warmest pelt of any animal that's found in the Arctic, and they can endure temperatures as low as minus 70 degrees Celsius. Once conditions get too cold, its metabolism will increase to provide warmth. So that's when its body's going to kick into overdrive and it's going to start producing a lot of that heat for it. Because of their ability to stay warm, they don't really need to hibernate much either, like you might think other animals do when it starts getting cold. Their fur instead will actually just change in the springtime when it gets warmer. So they're going to shed their very fluffy white fur that they have in the winter to a thinner brown coat in the springtime. So that way they can kind of adapt and stay warm in the winter, but not get too hot in the spring and in the summer. My friends, Arctic fox fur and blubber are both very, very important to the animals, but also to the communities living in the Arctic. For example, Inuit use fur in jackets, mittens, boots, and blanket, you name it. And blubber is actually a delicacy that's very, very high in protein, so it can keep you warm even after consuming it. Blubber can even be melted down into an oil so that you can, light a fire or a lamp and use it that way to help keep you warm. So that's how warmth works in the Arctic. Now, the next thing that we were talking about was maybe food scarcity, right? We're not going to be able to grow the same plants and vegetables that we may want to consume over here, or we can just go to the store to get. So food scarcity is another really big issue or a difficulty or challenge in the Arctic. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to you folks again, and I want to know how you might find food in the Arctic.
Ooh, let's see. Where do we go in the Arctic to find food? How would we go about that? Anyone who wants to chime in, please feel free. You guys are the best, honestly, the best chat audience I've ever seen in like 1,200 broadcasts that I've done. So way to go. Fishing, hunting. We're going to fish. So a lot of taking food from the sea. That's fantastic. Hunting. Maybe how are we hunting if you want to chime in with that, but these are all spectacular answers, everybody. So hunting and fishing, we're going to go out with gun, rod, and reel, and we're going to find some food out there. Nice.
Amazing. Yeah. Fishing and hunting, of course, maybe even some foraging. There definitely is a springtime in the Arctic. So we can grow some vegetables and things like that, some fruits maybe. But yeah, hunting and fishing are definitely going to be very, very important for us as humans. But what about animals? What are animals doing? They are also hunting and fishing. Back on the topic of Arctic foxes, these guys aren't very big. So it's really, really hard for them to take down these really big, meaty, blubbery animals all by themselves. So they actually rely on their friend, the polar bear, to help provide them with food. What they are called is a scavenger. And Arctic foxes and polar bears have something that we like to call a symbiotic relationship, which is where two animals kind of work together and support each other and help each other out using their set of skills, right? So in this relationship, polar bears are absolutely massive. These guys are going to take down different animals in the Arctic. They're going to eat whatever they want to eat. And then the Arctic fox will kind of come in and follow it around throughout the Arctic and eat whatever is left over. These guys are really, really smart and very, very sneaky. And this is a trick that they use to stay fed and not use up too much energy in the really, really cold conditions of the Arctic as well. Now, as for people, Inuit did creative ways to find and preserve food in the Arctic. Techniques like seasonal hunting, food preservation, techniques like drying and smoking and fermenting meats, snow pits and ice cellars, even sharing their food in their community really, really helps them with food scarcity. Not only have they passed these traditions down for many, many generations, the techniques themselves have been really, really sustainable as well. They make sure to, not let anything go to waste and not take more than they need. The Inuit also base their hunting off of the season. So, depending on what season it is and what animals are available during that season, it'll affect what they hunt and what they can kind of gather and preserve. I have a video of my friend Abigail here who's just going to mention how important the water is to Indigenous communities and why respecting it is so, so important to them.
The first peoples of this land along the coast and connected for generations since time immemorial. They have relied on one another in a reciprocal relationship. My people, the Musqueam, have never viewed themselves as above the water, but one with the water. I was taught that the ocean is the heart of the world, highlighting its importance to us to take care of it. From the beginning of time, we have been taught from generation to generation how to observe the seasonal changes to the environment around us. We never take more than what is needed and are sure not to waste. For example, every piece of the salmon is used and the bones are returned back to the water, and a prayer of thanks is given.
There we go. So as my friend was mentioning, they like to use every single part of the animal and they're going to try not to waste anything because you can imagine there's not a lot of availability in the Arctic anyways. So you want to make sure that whatever you're taking, you're using up all of it. A really good example of that is how Indigenous groups have used whales. Sustainability and respect for nature are really, really important to Inuit culture. A really important animal for Inuit are whales, as they're used for so many different things. And in order to ensure nothing is wasted, every single part of the whale will be used for different things like shelter and meat and sunglasses, clothing, oil, tools. This is something that I'm sure all of us can learn from. Our really, really high rates of production and waste have had really negative impacts on our ocean and have a significant influence on climate change. So it's really, really important to look at things that we can change in our own lifestyle and adopt so that we can have a better impact on our ocean. And one thing is managing our consumption. And that leads into the last thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to the Arctic and how it's being affected. That is climate change, my friends. How has climate change affected animals and communities in the Arctic? What do we think? I'm going to turn it over to you folks. How do you think climate change might affect the coldest part of our planet?
Ooh, I think our kids are going to be really on the ball with this because you guys have been so keen on all of this. Again, many of you are learning about climate change for the very first time in your classrooms this year, and that's spectacular if that's the case. If you've been covering this for a few years, how might climate change affect animals and communities in the Arctic? So we've got dirtier water impacting the water in some way, global warming, melting the ice. That's fantastic. Anyone else want to try melting their home, which is very interesting. I'm so glad you mentioned melting their home as opposed to just the ice. This is the place where these animals live, and so it's really important to highlight that. We've got lots of dirty water. We've got the fact that temperatures are increasing a lot over the last 30 years, affecting permafrost. Some great science terms there. Geez, that you guys continue to be the best audience on chat full time.
I love these answers. Thank you all so much. I'm seeing some even more incredible answers, like, migration changes for animals that have to travel across the Arctic. If the ice is melting, where are they going to go? My friends, you are all on the ball. Answers. Thank you all so much. Now, as Jesse mentioned, some of you might have been learning about climate change for some time, but this also might be a new term for some of you folks. So in case you don't know, climate change is a long-term change in global or regional climate average weather patterns. So an example of that would be if this summer is hotter than other summers, but next summer it goes back to normal. That's not necessarily climate change. That might have just been an instance, a one-off instance. But our trends are showing that every year it is getting hotter. So that would show very, very obvious signs of climate change. So if it's climate change, it has to be consistent over a duration of time. My friends, climate change is severely impacting our ocean. It affects plant and animal health, food availability, cleanliness, sea temperatures as well. Climate change is heavily impacting our Earth, but especially regions like the Arctic. My friends, the Arctic Circle is one of two polar circles. We have one at the top and one at the bottom. The Arctic is at the northernmost point, so all the way at the top. And unfortunately, the Arctic has been significantly impacted by climate change. Ice in the Arctic Circle used to account for around 4% of the Earth's surface, but between the 80s and 2020, ice coverage shrunk by around 13%. That's only in around 30 years we've lost around this much ice. Even the ice that, is still around, it's melting a lot faster. It's a lot thinner and weaker as well. Now, obviously, the impacts that we talked about are really, really severe, and they're going to be hurting a lot of animals that live inside of the Arctic, affecting what food is available to them, how they can migrate, their sleeping patterns, their health, things like that. But it's also significantly going to impact those millions of people that live in the Arctic as well. Right? Removing habitats, access to food, all that stuff is going to be really, really impacted for these people. I have a video here of Mia, who actually lives in northern Canada, and she has seen many, many different changes due to climate change where she lives. So let's take a look at what exactly her experience has been.
Youth my age definitely believe that climate change is happening, and that's what we call it. We usually get at least 5 blizzards a year in winter. Last year we had 1. Permafrost melting, hotter summers, those are huge changes that I've seen. I'm scared if it's going to get worse and our summers are going to get hotter and our winters aren't going to last as long. That will change the entire Inuit culture and what we follow.
There we go. So there are a lot of changes taking place in the Arctic because of things like climate change. And, maybe we've all seen some changes around us as well. I want you all to take this opportunity to share with me, what are some changes that you have seen around you due to things like climate change? What have you noticed?
And I'm so glad you asked this, because I think when I was a kid, people assumed that, climate change way in the future. And I can tell you, I'm 32, and the weather has radically shifted since I was the age of our students in today's classes. I really encourage you, ask your parents, ask your teachers how the weather has changed near them. Climate has changed near them over the last few decades, especially. So less snow days, much hotter. These are all big things. I grew up in Toronto, and the number of days that reached 40 Celsius or like over 100 Fahrenheit are way more common than they ever used to be. It's actually difficult to go outside sometimes now. Raising temperature, more wildfires. We're seeing that all around the world. You guys have some spectacular answers here. So keep asking the people in your life and share what you have seen the changes with too.
Exactly. And I'm seeing a lot of people mentioning, warmer summers, more wildfires. The world is a little bit more gray. Yes, for sure. Canada is really, really connected to the Arctic. A lot of our country is part of the Arctic Circle. So, we are very, very impacted by things like climate change. And, we're listing a lot of negatives, a lot of scary things. I know for me, we don't have a lot of snow anymore. We used to have snow that was higher than me, but now we barely get any snow. And when we do, the blizzards are so intense, and it comes out of nowhere. So these things can all be really, really scary. Climate change can be really scary. But my friends, I want to promise you there is hope. There is so much that we can do to change and turn the tide so that we can help protect the ocean, protect the Arctic, and maybe reduce the impacts of climate change. Now, before I give you some suggestions, I want to turn it over to you folks one last time from my end. And I want to ask you what you think you can do to help reduce the impacts of climate change for the Arctic.
My favorite question, and worth noting that throughout the year, not just with Ocean Wise, but with all of our partners, we're going to be exploring some of those solutions that are happening right now. It's not like no one's been doing anything. In fact, since I was a boy, there's been so much investment, so many amazing things that people are doing globally to help combat climate change, save species, and do all these big things that are facing the big challenges that we're seeing in the world. So don't use as much plastic. Fantastic from our folks in Texas. Don't pollute, recycle. Awesome. Pack litterless lunches on YouTube. We've got don't drive when you can walk or bike. These are all fantastic options. So there's lots that we can do. There's lots that you might already be doing. Make more ice. That's an interesting one. I like that, Illinois. Fantastic. Nala, they're on the ball as usual.
I absolutely love these answers. Thank you all so much for sending these answers in. This is incredible. Some ocean-wise answers or some ocean-wise solutions that we like to provide. One thing that we can do is reduce our consumption. My friends, a lot of things that we use don't actually come from our country. We import it from different parts of the world. So there's a lot of planes and boats and trucks being driven around bringing us our items. If we reduce consumption and we only eat or buy or consume what we need, we can reduce the amount of boats and planes and trucks that might be traveling around the world. And that means less carbon output, which can help climate change. And it also helps a lot of animals that live in the ocean by reducing that noise that's created for them that creates really, really high stress. So if you don't need it, don't buy it. If you do need it, try to source it locally. That's always a really, really important and big thing that we can do in our personal life to help combat climate change. The next thing that we can do is exactly what we're doing today. Join programs, go out, take part, learn, and support organizations and initiatives that are working towards changing the tide, turning the tide, and doing something for climate change. So continue doing what you're doing today. Join programs, not only with us, with all of Explore by the Seat of Your Pants partners, and learn about what's going on our planet, stay educated, and keep the conversation going. Last but not least, take what you learned today and share it with your friends and your family. I would like to challenge you all to take one new thing that you learned today and share it with 3 people in your life. That way we can keep the conversation going and, raise awareness everywhere we go, take up space, use your voice and talk about what's going on, and maybe talk about what we can do to help with this problem, because there are so many things we can do. I want to urge you all to do that. Thank you all so much for joining in on my program today, on the first program of 5 this week. I hope you all had a good time. I know I did. I want to thank Waves of Change and all of our partners for supporting us in this. If you all want to make a difference in your classroom, you can download the Commit to Act app and track all the, plastic or waste that you're consuming and see what differences you can make. You can also create your own e-card and submit it so that, we can create some artwork and some dialogue and conversation around climate change and, get people talking about it and raise some awareness. Thank you all again. And I'm so excited to pass it back to Jesse and do some Kahoot.
Well, that was spectacular. I will pass along the Commit to Act thing to all our classes, as well as OceanWise's amazing website to keep the learning going. For now, first of all, thank you so much for such an in-depth and fantastic presentation. And as you said, we are going to go into our Kahoot. So, classes, if you're new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Mel and I's everlasting respect. So were you paying attention to some of our animal facts today? Are you excited to answer some questions? I think we covered all of these, or at least all of these adjacent. So if you get any wrong, that's fine. Just play along. And if you just want to yell out in your class, that is totally fine as well. The more the merrier. And then we are going to go to our Glenview, Illinois first at Avoca West Elementary for our first question after we finish the Kahoot. But let's get started. And Mala, if you want to help us out by giving us hints for any of these questions, we'd love your insight. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Drum roll, please. True or false? Penguins can be found all over the Arctic in Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. We featured foxes. We showcased some other creatures in this. Did we have penguins in the thing? Do you remember any penguin conversations? I don't know. Maybe not. 28 answers in so far. Get those answers in 5 seconds. Thank you for your quizzical look. I think that might have helped us along. Let's see. This is always a tough one. Oh, dead split. I love it. Okay. So, are there penguins in the Arctic?
Contrary to belief, unfortunately, there are not. They live down south, my friends.
Yeah. So polar bears live in the north, penguins live in the south. Ne'er the twain shall meet. They live in totally different sections of the world. Penguins come up as high as the Galapagos, so they do reach the equator. Polar bears stick around in the high Arctic, but there's no penguins up north. I'm so glad we had that split on our first question. Inspired ant is in our lead. True or false? Number 2. The Arctic fox changes its coat to match the season. We explicitly covered this. Who is paying attention? Let's find out. 33 answers so far. That's its winter coat where it's blending in with the snow, very white. Does it keep that all year long? I don't know. I must admit, I don't know if you agree. Like, their summer coat's kind of shaggy. Their winter coat looks awesome. They look very, they're kind of haggard.
I agree.
Okay. Most of you got this right. Yes, they changed their coat. How neat is that? I'm wearing a coat for the first time this year because it's fall here in Newfoundland. So it got down to like 10 Celsius, 50 Fahrenheit today. I had to put on a coat. Yeah. Oh, well, the season's coming. Fabulous sea lion takes our lead. Perfect creature with lots of blubber. The North Pole is, for question 3, on land, on sea ice, or mythical. Now, Mama showed a picture of the North Pole earlier in one of her maps. Now, the question is, was it on a land surface? Was it like in Greenland or in Canada somewhere? Or was it in the middle of that big ocean at the top of the world? 50 answers in. Let's see. It is on sea ice, yes. So, the South Pole is in like the heart of Antarctica. It's on land. A lot of the Arctic is frozen sea ice. It's why climate change is impacting it so much, is it's melting a lot of that sea ice. And so it's changing sort of the topography and where animals can live, all those things that we talked about earlier. So the North Pole is on sea ice. If you want to go there, you've got to wait for winter and sort of ski out there. Fabulous sea lion keeps our lead. Well, we got one more question before we dive in with Q&A for you. So you put your thinking cap on as well. The Inuit have inhabited the Arctic for how long? We had a lot of Inuit stories today. Have they been there for 50 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, or over 5,000 years? We've been covering, you do such a nice job of this at Oceanwise, the indigenous contributions to the history and culture here for thousands and thousands of years, which that might give you a thing. Ooh, nice mix. Over 5,000 years. Oh, like they've been here forever. It's crazy.
Time immemorial. Yep, they've been here forever.
We actually very recently discovered that humans crossed over from Asia and came to North and South America way earlier than we thought they did. Very recently with a new scientific discovery. So some cool research on that front. All right. Inspired Ant is third. Fabulous Sea Lion is second. Ooh, spoiler for the win by a big margin. Dun, 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 dun. Drum roll, please. Champion Llama is our winner. Way to go, guys. Well, if you are any of those three, let us know who you are in the chat, and we are going to dive in with our Q&A. So, Avoca West, grade 3s, we're going to come to you first. Grisham Middle School, you're next, so get ready. But third graders, hello.
Oh, Avoca West, come on up. Have a seat. No. Everybody be seated. Come on up. Come on up in the black. Here we go. You had a question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now go down here so they can see you. There you go. Now, quiet in the room, please. Quiet in the room so we can hear. Go ahead.
Can I do it today?
Avoca, third grade. Go ahead.
Can we do this at home?
Oh no, what's your question for her about the Arctic?
About the Arctic. So can we so do some people live in like Antarctica, or is like
Great. That's a great question. Fantastic.
Was that do people live in Antarctica?
Yes.
Oh, so in Antarctica, I think it's the only continent with like no permanent human residence. There's a lot of research going on in Antarctica. So we go down there to study the climate, study the environment a lot. But I don't think there's actually a lot of constant or permanent civilization there. In the Arctic, 100%, as Jesse said, millions of people over thousands of years, and they've sustainably lived there. But I think the Antarctic is a little bit too harsh for even us to withstand.
And it's really hard to find. We didn't actually get to Antarctica for the first time till like the late 1800s when we started seeing it and actually setting foot on the landscape. There's about 4,000 researchers that live there in the summer, 1,000 in the winter, but it's a constantly rotating band of people, and we require a lot of infrastructure to allow us to live down there. It's a very neat question. I don't know if we've ever had that before. Christian Middle School, come on in, guys, and take us away to Texas.
A little bit. There you go. All right.
Hello. My question is, have you ever seen the two symbiotic animals, the Arctic fox and the polar bear, like actually do it?
Yeah.
Like,
Engage together.
Like engage.
Yeah, so we have a lot. So again, the Arctic is really, really hard to study in, but we do have some wonderful researchers, including researchers at OceanWise that work up there. We do now have a lot of footage and pictures and videos of these animals interacting with each other. It's actually really funny because the polar bear is so aggressive. You wouldn't think that it would want anybody in its area, but there's a lot of pictures where you'll just kind of see like an Arctic fox following it around, just kind of bopping its head behind snow. And it doesn't even really, the polar bear doesn't even really mind if the Arctic fox comes in for a little nibble. They won't really bother each other. Again, the Arctic fox is very respectful. So he's smart for staying respectful and giving the polar bear some space. But yes, there is a lot of footage now of that.
There is. Frozen Planet by BBC is a really great series that highlights some of that dynamic. But in general, around the world, when you have little predators and big predators, you'll find that the little ones tend to follow the big ones around, wait for them to make a kill, and then they'll sort of nibble at what's left. So it's a very common dynamic. And again, a neat question that we've never featured here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So thank you for that. Grade 6 of St. Isabel. We're heading to you next, and then Miss Nedco, you're after that. I'm coming to everyone, I promise. But come on in, sixes.
How does climate change affect like ocean life and like sea animals?
Ooh, that's a great question. We kind of covered that near the end of the program. Now, in the Arctic, again, we're not going to have as many animals as maybe in the rainforest, right? So one thing is all this ice melting, animals that need to migrate, like maybe caribou, polar bears, animals that rely on ice for coverage, for their homes, for their habitat, just to walk across. If there's not a lot of ice, if it's breaking apart like this, you can imagine it might be difficult for these animals to get to where they need to get to in order to survive during seasons. So one thing is definitely migration. Another thing is that with climate change has really, really big impacts on something called the food chain. In your classrooms, can you all show me like a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you've ever heard of a food chain before? Jesse, what are we seeing here?
Okay, we got some that do, some of the younger ones are kind of iffy. So we got a big range of grade like 1 through 7 today.
All right. Well, just briefly, a food chain is essentially the hierarchy of animals consuming each other in order to survive. So at the top in the Arctic, you might imagine there would be, the polar bear is going to be at the top. Underneath that guy, there might be like a caribou, right? Or a seal. And then the seal is probably going to eat some sort of fish. And then that fish is going to eat a microalgae, right? Now, with climate change and the water temperature changing, food availability being way less, a lot of these animals are kind of being affected and they're kind of dying off. And because of that, a lot of animals at the top won't necessarily have anything to eat either. So climate change is affecting everything from habitat availability to food availability to even like homes as well.
I love that answer. And one just quick plug I want to throw in is orca. So a lot of you will know killer whales. Increasingly, they can get into places that they didn't used to be able to get to because the water's warmer, and they're like the apex predator of the entire ocean. So creatures that didn't used to have to worry about killer whales eating them are now in a little bit of a bigger threat. So that's something that we're seeing both in the north and southern poles. And it's just a really, really neat change. I mean, it's neat for us to witness. It's kind of scary for the creatures that the killer whales are eating, but that's a really thoughtful question. Thanks, St. Isabel. All right. We're going to go a little bit long because we're rebels and there's just so many of you. So I'm going to try and take all your questions as soon as I can. Miss Nedko's class, we'll head to Ottawa. Come on in, 7th graders.
So we know that the climate change can make things hotter, but I was going to ask, can it make the environment colder?
Interesting.
Yeah, so the thing with climate change, back in the day, we used to only focus on global warming. But as time has gone on and we've seen so many changes in weather, that's why we call it climate change, is because it's not only getting hotter, in some parts it's getting way colder as well. Some places are experiencing insane weather patterns, right? Places that used to be really hot are now having ice storms, and places that are normally frozen are completely melting. So climate change is affecting all climate. It can be colder and hotter for sure.
Yep. That's something that would, man, honestly, I know it sounds like I'm flattering you guys. These are really great questions that we have not had before. So thank you very much for this. This is such a fun program. All right, Miss Ramos of class, we're going to head to Miami. Come on in, guys. Hey, 3rd graders. Hi. Yeah. Oh, your mic's not on. It should be on, but it's not. Okay. So we'll say hi, and what you can do, share in the chat, and I'll pass along your question, okay? I'm really sorry that it's given some trouble, but that's good to know, and thank you very much for that. Share it there, and I'll share it in just a minute, okay, guys? Cedar View, we're going to head to U5 F7D. Come on in. Hey, unmute. Hi.
Approximately how thick are Arctic foxes' coats?
Ooh, that's a great question. I feel like I should know this, but I don't know. Jesse, do you happen to know this?
I've seen Arctic fox pelts before, so they are really, really thick fur. They're really dense fur, so that's something that you get more than like a thickness. Blubber tends to be thick, fur tends to be dense. So the densest fur in the world is sea otters, actually, and they've got 1 million hairs in like a square inch. So more hair than you have on your entire head, they've got an area this big. I gave myself like a really cool hairdo with that. I should do that more often. So that's what you'll have with Arctic foxes. Thickness, I can try and find for you, and I'll do that as we go along with the broadcast. But that's a really neat question.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
But you can imagine it has to be pretty long and pretty thick to withstand like the winds and the cold. And it's probably very similar to like some dog species where the hair is really long, but as soon as they get wet, they like completely shrink up and they're very, very small. So the hair is going to make up a lot of their body size.
Cool question, guys. Miss Fisher's class, we're heading to you guys. Carsonville, come on in. Hello.
Hi, we have Heidi with a question.
What happens to the fur and blubber in the hot summer?
Ooh, great question. So in the Arctic fox's case, the Arctic fox is going to shed its fur and it's going to get a new coat of fur and it's going to be brown. So with that, it'll camouflage better in the dirt as well, and it'll have a thicker coat. And blubber, it'll always stay there. Animals will just kind of go into the water or out of the water to kind of mitigate it. Even what they're eating and how much they're eating will impact how much heat they're storing or maybe releasing body as well. So diet, habitat, all that stuff can really, really help manage an animal's body temperature.
Yeah, fantastic question, guys. And on the Arctic fox, and I just looked this up too. So their summer coat's a lot thinner than their winter coat, as you might expect. You want to have a little bit sort of fewer layers, so to speak. Doesn't seem to be a really concrete answer on how thick it is, but it's a very neat question. So do explore that a little bit more. National Geographic is a great little bit on Arctic foxes. I want to note too, as we go to Miss Avila's class, Miss Ramos, please do feel free to share in the chat still. We'll try and sneak yours in. Miss Avila, we're going to wrap up with you in a second. If you guys have more questions, I know that time flies and you're having fun. We are nearing the end of the broadcast. Email them to us. The Oceanwise team are like the best question answers ever. So if you have more questions, email them to us at exploringbytheseatofyourpants. I'll pass it to Mala. She'll blow your mind with some cool answers and we'll have some fun. But Miss Avila, come on in. Hey. Hi.
The question is like all the animals in the sea, do they come up or do they always stay down?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, like most habitats in the ocean, some animals are going to have to come up for air and some of them are going to have to stay in water. So, the Arctic does have fish and sharks and things like that. So those animals will stay underwater, like fish and things like that will stay underwater. But a lot of animals like whales and seals, they will come up to take a breath. Polar bears as well will only really swim in the water to kind of catch some food and come back up. So I would say it's pretty evenly balanced of animals that need to stay in the water and outside of the water for sure.
All right, we are going to take two more quick ones. I'll field one really fast, actually, which is if an orca's ever encountered a polar bear, never on film. That's not something that's been captured. However, unless no, you didn't. Okay, it hasn't been the night. Just missed it. Polar bears will eat beluga whales, though. They'll literally wait at the whale breathing hole and grab them and pull them out and eat them, which is insane. It's likely that an orca wouldn't view a polar bear as prey. They're very discerning. They don't attack people. They don't attack a lot of things. They're very picky with what they eat because they're such effective predators. So it's a really neat question. And then Miss Ramos' class, our final query: how can we fix climate change? What can we do before we wrap up together today?
All right, so what can we do about climate change? Now, my friends, we kind of went over this, but 3 things that we can do is reduce our consumption again, maybe watch what we're buying, what we're eating, be a little bit more mindful about what we're consuming and where it's coming from, just to reduce carbon emissions. Another thing that we can do is continue learning and supporting groups that are doing the research and trying to get that knowledge out. Number 3 is continue talking about it, raise awareness, things like that. But in our day-to-day, just consuming less plastic, consuming less imported goods, things like that can make a really, really big difference when talking about trying to make an impact for climate change.
What a beautiful answer to wrap up a spectacular broadcast with over 700 of you coast to coast to coast today. This has been such a fun start to our Ocean Wise series. Please do check out our website. See if you want to sign up for more. We've got tides, whales, change makers. What else do we have? Geez, there's 5. I've forgotten there's so many. It's exciting. So come join us. They'll all be on YouTube, and we'll email you with some more info to keep the learning going when you are done. Check out ocean.org to learn even more. And Mala, is there any last message you want to share before we bring in all the kids to say thank you and farewell today?
Just thank you all so much for starting off our week so wonderfully. We really appreciate all the inquiry, all the support. Your questions are amazing. Your answers are just as incredible. I hope you all stay curious, keep asking wonderful questions, and I hope to see you all during the rest of our week.
Me too. I know some of our classes are, and so we're going to bring them all in to say a big thank you and farewell. Avoca West, Grisham Middle School, St. Isabel, Miss Oh, thank you, Miss Fisher.
Thank you. Everybody listen up, please.
All right, we are done.